The church bells rang slow and heavy, each sound sinking deep into Charlotte Evans's chest, as if it were meant only for her. They rang for her mother, but Charlotte felt as though something else was being buried too. Perhaps her past. Perhaps her dignity. Perhaps the last thin thread holding her marriage together. The small stone church stood on a hill outside a quiet Massachusetts town, surrounded by bare trees and damp winter ground. Outside, the air smelled of cold stone and fading flowers. Charlotte stood at the front beside her mother's coffin, her black gloves clenched tight in her hands. Her head was bowed, but not in prayer. She was fighting to breathe without breaking. On her left stood the people she had known all her life. Farmers with weathered faces, shopkeepers in dark coats, women who had once braided her hair and scolded her for muddy shoes. On her right stood the world she had married into. Polished shoes, dark silks, quiet voices, and eyes that measured everything, including her. Henry Lancaster, Duke of Lancaster, stood beside her. He was tall and still, one gloved hand resting on the silver head of his cane. His face was calm, carved into something unreadable. To anyone watching, he looked like a devoted husband supporting his grieving wife. Charlotte knew better. "Are you well, Your Grace?" whispered Mrs. Allen, her mother's longtime housekeeper, standing just behind her. "I am well," Charlotte said, though the words tasted false, only tired. The minister spoke of heaven and comfort, of a life well lived. Charlotte heard only pieces. Her mother's name. Words like strong and devoted. Her throat tightened. Strong, yes. Devoted, perhaps. But her mother had also been practical to the bone. 2 years earlier, Charlotte could still see her mother at the writing desk, papers neatly arranged, her voice brisk and firm. "You will be Duchess Charlotte," her mother had said. "Security, position. You will never fear bad harvests or debts again." "And him?" Charlotte had asked quietly. "What does he gain?" Her mother had not paused. "He gains what he needs most. Money to save his estates, and a wife of good name who will give him an heir. It is fair." Charlotte had believed gratitude could grow into love. She had been young enough to hope. The minister's voice pulled her back to the present. "And now we commend her to God's keeping." The coffin was lifted. The church doors opened, letting in a slice of grey morning light that fell across the polished wood. Margaret Evans, mother. Charlotte followed behind as they stepped outside. Cold air cut into her lungs. She kept her eyes on the narrow path leading to the grave, lined with bare shrubs and wet grass. She waited for Henry to offer his arm. He did not. He walked just ahead, as distant as if she were a stranger. At the graveside, the ceremony was brief. Earth struck the coffin with dull final sounds. Charlotte's vision blurred. "Goodbye," she whispered. "She died content," Mrs. Allen murmured. "She knew you were safe." Safe. The word twisted inside Charlotte. Nothing about her life felt safe. When it was over, people drifted toward the church hall for tea and quiet talk. Henry turned to her at last. "We must receive them," he said, "for your mother's sake." She nodded. He offered his arm then, and she took it because that was what was expected, and because her knees felt weak. Inside the hall, condolences came one by one. Soft words. Gentle nods. Curious glances. Charlotte stood by the door, her face carefully calm. Lady Ashcombe, Henry's aunt, approached with a rustle of black silk. "You bore yourself well," she said. "Your mother would be proud." "Thank you," Charlotte replied. Lady Ashcombe's eyes flicked briefly toward Henry. "Widowhood brings certain freedoms," she added softly. "In time you may find it suits you better." "I am not a widow," Charlotte said, confused. Lady Ashcombe smiled thinly and moved on. For nearly an hour they stood. Henry spoke little. His silence felt like a storm gathering. Then, at last, he stepped away from the wall. "Ladies and gentlemen," Henry said, his voice clear. The room quieted. Cups were set down. Charlotte's heart began to race. "We are gathered today to honor Mrs. Evans," he continued, a determined and practical woman. Charlotte's fingers curled. Her determination extended to securing both her daughter's future and my estates. Many of you know our marriage was arranged under her guidance. A murmur spread. When we married, my estates were near ruin, Henry said calmly. Her fortune saved them. For that I am grateful. Charlotte felt cold creep up her spine. However, Henry said. The word hung in the air. The other essential part of our agreement has not been fulfilled. Every gaze turned to Charlotte. You mean the child, Charlotte said, her voice shaking but clear. The heir we do not have. This is hardly the place, she added. Not today. It is precisely because it is today, Henry replied, that it must be said. He turned to her fully. Our marriage was an arrangement. 3 years have passed. There is no heir. With your mother's passing, the contract is complete. I am no longer bound to a union that does not serve its purpose. The room spun. I have instructed my solicitor, Henry went on, to begin legal separation. You will receive an allowance. Suitable arrangements will be made. Gasps filled the hall. You choose to do this here? Charlotte asked. At my mother's funeral. I choose clarity, Henry said. Rumors will spread regardless. Is this clarity? She asked softly. To discard your wife in public. You will be provided for, he said. You will be free. Free, the word struck like a slap. Charlotte felt the room tilt. Sound faded. One thought rose above the rest, sharp and sudden. She could not remember when she had last been unwell in the way women counted time. Darkness closed in, and Charlotte fell. Charlotte woke to the sharp smell of vinegar and lavender. A woman's voice urged her to breathe slowly. When her eyes opened, Mrs. Allen's lined face hovered above her, tight with worry. You fainted, my lady, Mrs. Allen said. No wonder, after all that cruelty. Charlotte tried to sit, but the room swayed. Her head throbbed, and her body felt strangely heavy. Beyond the half-closed door, voices murmured, eager and excited, like birds gathering after a storm. Henry stood near the window, speaking quietly with his solicitor. He did not look shaken. That hurt more than the fall. I am well, Charlotte said automatically. I can return. You will do no such thing, Lady Ashcombe snapped from a nearby chair. Those people have had their spectacle. Henry turned at last. The carriage will take you back to the house, he said. There is no need for further strain today. How thoughtful, Charlotte replied weakly. She was helped to her feet and guided out a side door to avoid the crowd. The cold air outside steadied her somewhat, but her stomach twisted with unease. As the carriage rolled away, she pressed a hand against her middle without thinking. At the house, everything moved quickly. Orders were given. Papers appeared. Henry spoke in clipped tones as if this were a business meeting. You will return to your mother's home, he said. Your belongings will be sent within the week. So soon? Charlotte asked. There is no sense delaying, he replied. That night, Charlotte lay awake in her childhood room at the Evans house. The walls felt smaller than she remembered. Her body ached and a deep, strange nausea rolled through her. In the morning, Dr. Hughes arrived. He was kind, careful, and did not rush. Your courses? He asked gently. Absent, Charlotte admitted, for some time. He examined her and then sat back, his expression softening. My dear, he said slowly, I believe you are with child. The words struck her like thunder. With child, she whispered. Yes. Near 3 months, I would say. Charlotte's hands trembled. 3 months. That meant before the funeral, before the announcement, before everything fell apart. After the doctor left, Charlotte sat alone for a long time, her hands folded over her abdomen. Henry had divorced her because he believed she had failed him. All the while, his child had been growing inside her. She did not send word to him, not yet. Days passed. Then, weeks. Charlotte's body changed. Her strength returned slowly, but her resolve grew faster. She walked the fields, spoke with tenants, managed small matters her mother once handled. People watched her with curiosity, then respect. Letters came from the city. Henry was seen often in society. There were whispers of a new match, a younger woman, a hopeful one. Charlotte read the words without surprise. She folded the letters and set them aside. When Mr. Carter, Henry's solicitor, arrived unannounced, Charlotte met him calmly. "There are rumors," he said carefully. "His Grace wishes to avoid misunderstandings." "You mean he fears scandal?" Charlotte replied. He offered a paper, a generous allowance, in exchange for silence. Charlotte pushed it back. "I will not sell the truth." As autumn turned cold, her condition could no longer be hidden. Dr. Hughes confirmed what she already knew: the child was strong. Then, one morning before dawn, pain woke her. The labor was long and fierce. Charlotte cried out, cursed, prayed, and held on. When it ended, a small, furious cry filled the room. "A son," the doctor announced. Charlotte wept as she held him. A boy, the heir Henry had demanded and cast her aside for. She named him Thomas. As she watched him sleep, one thought burned clear. Henry would not rewrite her life as a footnote. If he wished to build a future on lies, she would bring the truth to his very door. And soon, all of society would hear it. The night Henry Lancaster announced his engagement, London glittered, as if nothing ugly had ever happened within its walls. Chandeliers burned bright inside the Lancaster townhouse. Music spilled into the street. Carriages lined the road, carrying guests eager to witness the Duke's new beginning. Across the street, Charlotte Evans stood very still. She was dressed in black, not the mourning she had once worn for her mother, but something quieter, stronger. Her body still ached from childbirth, but she stood straight. She had not come to beg, and she had not come to accuse. She had come to speak the truth. Inside the house, Henry moved through the crowd with practiced ease. Lady Lydia stood at his side, young, lovely, and unaware of the storm gathering just beyond the doors. Applause rippled as Henry raised his hand for silence. Before he could speak, the doors opened. Charlotte stepped inside. The music faltered. Conversations died mid-word. Heads turned as recognition spread like a sharp wind through the room. Henry froze. For a moment, no one moved. Then whispers broke out, quick and hungry. A divorced duchess, uninvited, unashamed. Charlotte walked forward calmly, her steps measured. She did not look at Lady Lydia. She looked only at Henry. "Good evening, Your Grace," she said. Henry found his voice with effort. "Charlotte, this is not appropriate." "Neither was divorcing me at my mother's funeral," she replied quietly. The room stilled again. Henry swallowed. "What do you want?" Charlotte reached into her reticule and withdrew a folded paper. "I want the truth heard." She turned slightly, letting her voice carry. "When my husband declared our marriage finished," she said, "he believed I had failed to give him an heir." Murmurs rose. "What he did not know," she continued, "was that I was already carrying his child." Gasps echoed. Lady Lydia's face went pale. Henry stared at Charlotte, as if the floor had vanished beneath him. "That is impossible," he said hoarsely. Charlotte held out the paper. "Doctor's testimony. Dates, witnesses." Henry took it with shaking hands and read, his face drained of color. "You had a son," he whispered. "I have a son," Charlotte corrected. "He is alive, he is strong, and he is yours." The silence was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire. Henry straightened slowly. The room watched him with sharp attention. "It is true," he said at last, his voice strained but steady. "The child is mine." A wave of shock swept through the guests. Henry turned to Lady Lydia. "I cannot proceed with this engagement." Lady Lydia's mother stiffened. Lady Lydia herself looked stunned, then humiliated. Charlotte did not gloat. She did not smile. "I did not come to destroy your future," Charlotte said. "I came to protect my son from being erased." Henry met her eyes, something breaking in his expression. "You should have told me. You should have listened," she replied. The crowd buzzed, but Henry raised his hand again. "My son will be recognized as my heir," he said, "publicly and legally." That night, London gained a new scandal, but Charlotte gained something else. Control. Henry came to the Evans house 3 days later. He did not arrive with lawyers or pride. He arrived alone. Charlotte received him in the parlour, Thomas sleeping in her arms. Henry stopped short at the sight of the child. "My God," he whispered. "This is Thomas," Charlotte said. "You may look, nothing more." Henry knelt slowly, as if approaching something sacred. His hands hovered, unsure. "He looks like you," he said. "He looks like himself," Charlotte replied. Henry stood, shame written clearly on his face. "I was wrong," he said. "About everything." "Yes," Charlotte said, "you were." "I treated our marriage like a contract," he continued. "I spoke of duty and forgot decency." Charlotte's voice remained calm. "Words spoken cannot be pulled back. But actions can be chosen." "I want to make this right," Henry said, "for him and for you." "And what does right mean to you?" she asked. "That you return," he said, "that we rebuild." Charlotte shook her head. "I will not return to be convenient." Henry nodded. "Then let me earn it." Days turned into weeks. Henry came often, never demanding. He learned how to hold Thomas, how to quiet him, how to wait. The world watched closely. Henry publicly recognized his son, he corrected gossip, he defended Charlotte without condition. Slowly, trust grew. One evening, as Thomas slept between them in his cradle, Henry spoke softly. "Will you marry me again?" he asked. "Not because you must. Because you choose." Charlotte looked at her son, then at the man Henry had become. "If we do," she said, "it will be as equals." Henry bowed his head. "That is all I want." They married quietly. No contracts, no bargains. When the bells rang this time, they rang for life, not loss. Charlotte stood beside Henry, not as property, not as proof, but as a woman who had spoken when silence would have been easier. And when Thomas laughed for the first time, Henry wept openly. The heir he had demanded had arrived. But the family he nearly destroyed was the gift he never expected.